Hello and welcome to my channel, Inner Journey with Meditation. I'm Doris Angunuma. Which is interesting. I'm actually introducing my name this time, which is unusual. Right, today I want to talk about the pineal gland. And before we get into it, I want to just give a little bit of context as to how this came about in the first place. Like I said before, a lot of this information, discussion, dialogue is between me and my inner being. So I wondered about the body. I was thinking about the body, and I know that different aspects, different systems in the body have their own energetic field, their own auric field. And I started to wonder about the brain, and if the brain had an auric field. And then my inner being sort of like poked her head in. Oh, this is an interesting topic. Come on then, let's talk some more about it. It was a little bit like that, not exactly like that, but anyway, my point was I wondered about the brain because of my daughter and because of crystal apothecary. I know that different systems in the brain had their own auric field, and I wondered if the brain had its own auric field, and the answer is yes and no. Which is why I was pausing. I'm like, how do I say this? It's yes and no. So the conversation went on into a completely different tangent. And in essence, the brain is something that has a physical side and an energetic side, right? A lot of the time, doctors really focus on the physical side of the brain maybe they think there is an energy side, I don't know, but in any case there is definitely an energetic side, and that is consciousness. So consciousness enters the body and lights it up, and the image that I feel explains this better is a bit like a Christmas tree. So consciousness enters the body. So let's go for a Christmas tree, right? You have Christmas tree, you've got baubles, you have fairy lights. When the fairy lights are attached to the electric socket and the power isn't turned on, it's just there, isn't it? But when you turn the power on, then it's like the Christmas tree comes alive. That is what consciousness does to the body. When consciousness enters the body comes alive with its own nuances, with its own particular personality. But I was thinking, so consciousness is actually the energy that gives body life. And yeah, the answer is yes. And I was oh wow, that's amazing. And then my inner being started sort of prodding me, wanting me to go more and go deeper. And I didn't really know where this was going. And so she's like, well, what if you turned off some of those Christmas tree, some of those fairy lights? What if half of them was faulty? I was like, huh? In any case, rather than go through all our conversation, I'll tell you this now. When consciousness enters the body, three things happen. There is an organ in the body that does it act, or does it do three things? So the organ does two things, and the third one is actually by consciousness itself. So when consciousness enters the body, two things happens. There is a filter and a fuse, and I'm using the term filter and fuse because of what they do, because of the properties that they do. The easiest one, the fuse. a fuse, if you imagine electricity, you going from the mains to a kettle, or say, I don't know, a kettle or a light switch. There's always a fuse, right? And the fuse reduces the power from the mains. Sometimes it's a transformer. I suppose I could say a transformer. But my point is to protect the integrity of that light switch or the light bulb. There is always a fuse that reduces the electricity that comes in, right? So that's what this organ does. When consciousness comes into the body, this organ reduces the magnitude of the energy, of the power of consciousness, if you like, as it comes into the body. If it doesn't do that, the body would just obliterate. You know, you could say early man, when they consciousness tested this out thousands of years ago, and to get it perfected like this, right? So that's one. The second thing is the filter. And the filter, and I say it's a filter because before you start, just checking that this is on, before you came to this world, you agreed to do certain things, to get involved. You had a plan for your life, and part of that would be for you, and part of that would be for you to do what? For you to remove the right word, remove most of who you are and what you already know. So remember now, consciousness has been around for millions of years, right? Since before the earth itself was created. So they know a lot already. Yet you come in as a newborn baby crying and learning to do ABC. You consciousness has agreed to leave behind most of itself, most of what it knows. And that's what this filter does. This filter removes most of what you are and most of what you know. The filter also apply biases. And what I mean by that is, if you decide that in order for me to achieve what I want to come here and do, I want to have a bias for sciences, a bias for the arts, a bias for singing, you know. So I'm basically saying that you as consciousness, you actually have ability to do everything. You just switch most of them off. You switch most of them off before you come into the physical body. You decide that I'm gonna come in here and like sciences and like the arts and or maybe like both, or do love hairdressing, you know, those things. You decide that this is what you'd want to focus your attention on. And this also includes sexuality. You decide before you come if you what sexual orientation you are going to be. This is all part of what consciousness does, right? So I did say consciousness does three things. The third thing is that consciousness builds the mind. At least the skeletal part, the skeletal structure of the mind, right? So when consciousness first enters the body, it enters via this organ. And this organ, by the way, is the pineal gland. If you haven't guessed it already from the title, you know, this organ is the pineal gland. Consciousness enters the body, expresses itself in the body via the pineal gland. When it enters the body, the pineal gland acts as a filter and a fuse. Filter to remove, to determine how you want to navigate this life. to reduce the magnitude of the energy that is consciousness. And consciousness builds the mind. These are the three things that happen when consciousness enters the body. So then, in sleep, what happens in sleep? Because when you sleep, the body you're still breathing. You know, the body's functions are still happening, albeit it is on a sort of low level. So in sleep, consciousness resides within the pineal gland. So it's, rather than being focused outwards in the body where you're awake, you are manipulating the physical world, your hands, all of that. Consciousness actually resides back into the pineal gland. And this means, remember I said it builds the mind, this means that consciousness now resides within the mind. That's what happens in sleep. Just to say a quick one, in death, consciousness just focuses out of the body, out of the pineal gland, completely out of the body, and that's it. You know, it's just not focused in that body anymore. The pineal gland it cannot re-enter the pineal gland, because the pineal gland has been sort of self-destruct or something. There is something that happens in death that prevents consciousness from re-entering the body, right? That's a quick one. Put that to the side. What I want to say is, just think about this for a minute. In sleep, consciousness is still in charge of the body. Your outer consciousness, that is still in charge of the body. So the body is still functioning. The body is still functioning. I said function as I wanted to say functioning as normal, but you know what I mean. You're asleep. You know, your digestive system is at rest, but it's still there. You're still breathing in and out. The brain functions, although they're at low level, that's still happening. So that's because consciousness still resides within the body. The outer consciousness still resides within the body, right? And it is staying within the mind. It is basically not focused outwards. It is focused entirely, mostly, I would say, not entirely, say mostly, because remember I said you're still, in my other videos I talked about how you're still attached to your wider consciousness. So it's not like you're just like a little bulb and you're entirely just within the pineal gland and that's you. No, in fact, you're still attached to your wider consciousness, right? Let's just say this is the pineal gland and consciousness is in it, right? In when you're awake, it's out. In sleep time, it just focuses back in within the mind. It's gone back into the mind. And the one thing that consciousness does when it first enters the body, and I told you it builds the skeletal part of the mind. The other thing is, when you sleep, how do I say this? The mind, it builds the mind from the same things, from the same energy that it is made of. So in sleep, consciousness focuses back into the mind. Let's assume that this is the pineal gland and this is consciousness. I said already, consciousness is still attached to the wider consciousness. It is never, I mean, my hand is a bit big, but never mind. What I'm trying to say here is, if this is the pineal gland, when consciousness is not expressed out into the body, it is expressed within the pineal gland itself. Now, what this means is that for coma patients, consciousness is unable to express itself back outwards. And so what that means is most likely the pineal gland has been damaged in some form. So when you fix the pineal gland, and consciousness will be able to express itself out again. That's one. But remember now, I said for coma patients, as long as consciousness resides within the pineal gland, it means that the functions of the body are still going on. If the body is not looking after itself, if you're not breathing on your own, if you're not, coma is like deep sleep. If that's the case, then consciousness is just unable to express itself out. And so assistance would be needed to repair the pineal gland, and they'll come out of the coma. If consciousness has come out completely of the body, then repairing the pineal gland will make no difference because it's already out. And I said earlier that when consciousness is out of the body, it's like I always think of a non-return valve. You can come out, but you can't go back in. Something like that. So that's that. That's one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to mention is the mind. I said consciousness builds the mind when it first enters the body. Sort of builds. Should we call it a frame? This is how I understand it. If you imagine that it sort of maybe builds a frame, it's the mind. It's like a room. The thing is, you go out, you experience life, as in you wake up, you experience life. You sleep, and those experiences is what consciousness uses those experiences in the mind, in the room of the mind, like continues to build it. So for example, which is why a lot of the times when you're asleep, you dream of things that you've been engaged in just before you sleep. You remember those in a funny way. It's like consciousness is using those experiences that you have, and if you imagine that the mind is like a room, right? Then every time consciousness expresses itself back into that room, it is using the experience from that day to build the walls of the room. Whatever the experience is, good experience, bad experience, all of it, because that's what it's here to do. Painful experience, lovely experiences, all of it. Every time you go to sleep, consciousness basically builds I call it the walls of the mind. The walls of the mind from itself. So let me use this example. If this is consciousness, right? Consciousness is my hand, the one that expresses itself in the physical, the one with the personality that is experiencing life. In sleep, it's like that. Sorry, not in sleep. When you're awake, you are out of the you're not out of the pineal gland, but you're seeing the world, you're manipulating the world, and in sleep you'll do that. I'm holding this hand because I'm saying that it's still within the pineal gland, but within the pineal gland is also where the mind is. Consciousness builds like brickwork from the experiences that it has in the physical world. It builds the mind up. It just, as long as you live, whatever it is, it's always building the mind up when you sleep. Again, I said to you that in one of my videos, I think it was the dreams videos, and I told you that your inner being is always with you. You're always still attached. I say attached, still linked. So energy, you're still linked to your wider consciousness, and your wider consciousness is sort of assisting you. So your wider consciousness is your wider consciousness in your mind. Your wider consciousness is not in your mind. Your wider consciousness is still part of your psyche. It's still with you as part of your psyche, because otherwise, how am I communicating with my inner being? You know, my thoughts, her thoughts. We are psychically linked. We are psychically connected energetically, and that is still not. That's through the psyche more than through the mind, because obviously built my own mind. What I'm trying to say is, when you go to sleep and in dreams, your wider consciousness communicates with you with a lot of the information from your memories that you've built over your life in that room, because that's like that room is the room of your experiences and your memories. That room is composed of that, right? So consciousness does that, and your inner being will communicate with you in your dreams with different parts of it. Now, why am I talking about this? It's the one thing that sort of that the conversation went to was about multiple personality disorder. I was like, well, what does that mean then? Does that mean you've got does that mean you've got two consciousnesses? Does that mean, what is it? And actually, my inner being said, well, I'm only attached to the main and to the primary consciousness within that room. There are other consciousnesses, and that's where the multiple personality comes about. And in fact, most mental health issue comes about there as well. But the one I was particularly interested in was the multiple personality disorder one. And it transpires that when consciousness builds the mind up with the experiences that it has encountered outwards in the physical plane, when it does that, there could be traumatic experiences, and that it would also use that and build the room, continually build the room as normal. But what tends to happen in the case of multiple personality disorder is that what tends to happen is that part of that structure comes alive. And that sounds kind of weird. And now let me just back up so that I can explain that. One of the nature of consciousness, right, is how do I say this? Is when you split, say, a piece of consciousness. I'm looking for a piece of paper around this room and I can't find one. When you split consciousness, into two, one of the properties that it has is that it has the potential. It has the ability to become independent. And the reason I say that is this is why I am an outer consciousness, you are an outer consciousness, and you have an inner consciousness, the bigger part of you, because you, the outer consciousness, came out from the inner consciousness, the bigger consciousness, your wider consciousness. So it's a small piece of you. It's a small piece of the. It's a small piece of the wider consciousness that has been expressed into the physical body. And therefore, that small piece is independent. You have independent thought, independent desires. You're still made of the same consciousness as your wider consciousness. You still have the same likes. You still have the same needs and all the rest of it. But you're independent. Now, that was I hope you understand that example, because I just remembered that was from another conversation that we had. Because if you understood that, then you'll understand that when consciousness, the small piece of it that's expressed in the pineal gland, created the mind from its own self, which means that the mind has the potential to also be independent. Can you see what I mean? I'm saying it has the potential. So regular healthy folks, they're okay. The mind is like a room that you build, and with your memories, right? With multiple personality disorder, there is a malfunction in that part of that structure, part of that room that was built, gains its own independence and becomes its own consciousness and expresses itself in the body. That's where that's come from. So how can you address that? How do you solve it? According to my inner being, you just fix that enclosure, that room of the mind. But now, like, what do you fix it with? You fix it with the same thing that it's made of, and it is made of consciousness. And I've said before, consciousness is electromagnetic energy. Fix it with a small electrical impulse. Fix a lot of mental health issues with a small electrical impulse. Amazing, huh? It's like I have these incredible conversations with my inner being, and I think I want to share this with the world. And if you heard some of my audio tapes, like, oh, so that's how that works. It's an awful lot of that, you know. But yeah, the pineal gland houses the mind. Fix the pineal gland, and you can remove a lot of pain that people go through, you know. That's amazing. I find that incredibly amazing that we can do this. Now, if I've connected with my inner being and I'm having conversations about little interesting things like this, imagine what you could come up with, what you're interested in, what problems you could solve if you connect with your inner consciousness. Consciousness is an electromagnetic energy that is a type of intelligent life. It's been around for millions of years, since before the earth was created. The earth was created so that we can experience life, interact with each other, but most importantly, consciousness wants to evolve. consciousness wants to evolve, and to evolve, it wants to experience life in all manner of ways. So how do we evolve? There is always a need. That thing has been on. There's always a need, a what if, oh, we found a problem, and there is always an answer. So you'd have a lot of consciousnesses that come into the physical plane to experience the problem, or to find different angles of a problem. For example, you have my daughter, she's got sensory processing disorder. You know, that's consciousness itself wanting to experience life as that. And then you have consciousness itself has the solution. Consciousness itself provides the solution. So consciousness has the problem, discovers the problem, and consciousness creates a solution. So there are loads of people that are either want to experience the problem, the what ifs, and there are also a lot of people that have come to this life to present the solution. This is why I say connect with your inner being and understand which one you are. You know, have you come to just experience life, experience the what if in a different vantage point? Have you got the solution? Maybe you have both. You know. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you in the next video.